Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. I'm Mike Montague and I'm here with Arif Khan, and we have our returning guest, Andy Christie from Safe Homes Canada. And tell us what Andy's going to be talking about, Arif.
Andy's a show favorite of ours because he's a tell it like it is kind of guy, and he's here to tell us about a new phenomenon taking over the industry, and it's the guaranteed home inspection. The question
want to hear about this.
Mike, is it too good to be true, or is it a buyer beware?
Let's find out.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we're here with Andy Christie, Safe Homes Canada. Thanks for being with us, Andy.
Welcome back, Andy.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You know what? What is going on in an industry where we're offering guaranteed home inspection results? Your house is guaranteed to pass. That sounds ridiculous.
I guess a guarantee is only as good as the person who executes the inspection. So caveat emptor, buyer beware. We're entering a new level of that now.
Guaranteed to pass.
It just sounds so cheesy, though.
Well, I think it's there's a sort of fundamentally, I think there's maybe a bias issue there fundamentally where nobody really wants to, or a lot of people don't want to believe something that the seller's telling them. Number one, the bigger concern relating to sellers inspections, guaranteed sellers inspections, is that a lot of inspectors are not thorough enough. So it's so critical that we teach buyers and sellers the questions to ask inspectors about the process.
So I get a realtor or somebody recommends to me, hey, you know what? You want to put your house for sale on the market, get yourself a home inspection, and it's actually going to be guaranteed. The buyer walks in.
No house left behind?
Yeah, no, exactly. The buyer walks in and goes, oh, great, this house is guaranteed to pass the inspection. So what? I'm being told as a buyer,
Why bother?
I don't need to go get I can save myself $375 or $500, and I don't need to go and get my own inspection. That's dangerous.
It's kind of crazy because no matter what side of the ball you're on, there are a number of very simple questions to ask an inspector about process.
Well, what is
and
that?
You can disqualify a lot of people.
Okay.
How do you inspect a roof during winter?
Get up there.
Get up on the roof.
Yeah, move the snow away. You can always see some shingles, flashings, chimneys, everything. For some reason in our industry, people make excuses. They want to do more inspections per day, right? We've got companies doing 4 or 5 inspections a day. Even 3 is crazy. 2 is working till midnight. It's just the way it is if you're doing a thorough inspection.
So how much time, just a standard municipal subdivision home,
smaller, newer home,
22,000 square feet, how much time should you be in there
absolute
going through
minimum.
that house?
So after doing this full time for 25 years, it's 2.5 hours. Last week, after one of my realtors found horrible, degraded, end of their life shingles at a guaranteed seller's inspection house, I looked at the shingles. They were done 2 years ago, and in the report it said normal wear and tear. And I called the company and I said, how long does it take to do an inspection? And they said 90 minutes. And that's pretty telling, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I also asked them if their inspectors get up on the roof. I said, how do you inspect the roof during winter? And they said, we don't. So there's a bit of a contradiction.
So I think what really comes down to is this is an industry. This is a numbers game. I mean, insurance in general is a numbers game. We're going to charge everybody a premium.
Exactly.
And then 1% of the time or 2% of the time,
we don't have to worry
we're
about
going to have to pay out and we're going to have to do something.
The numbers are there to support it,
But that doesn't
right?
help the new family or the new person who walked in and all of a sudden they thought they bought their dream home, they thought they're finally home, and they just inherited a headache.
Big time. And the other part of it is the agreements. I read the agreement for this deal last week when I was invited to check things out and help. The agreement is extremely protective of the underwriter. So there are fees that are associated with making a claim, multiple fees, and more conditions than you can shake a stick at. So try to get the claim. I'm sure it's doable in some very
it's going to cost you $10,000.
A small window of conditions, right? But it's just I guess you'd call it a pig in a poke, is one of the old sayings. It's just you're not getting what you think you're getting, and especially if you start with a non-thorough.
And the other thing that can happen there, you've bought that house. It has some things that the inspector either missed or fluffed over. You may not notice them themselves during the time you own that house. But
Good
when you
point.
turn around to sell yourself,
Yeah.
the next inspector points them out. And now the onus is on you.
That's a
I
great
didn't
point.
even know that was there.
That's a great point. It's
Yeah.
like people buying new houses, similar deal. They move in and they think they don't know the problems that exist there.
No, they expect it to be perfect because it's new.
Or and at least in this situation, they expect their guaranteed inspection report to be accurate, and unfortunately,
Yeah,
that's
it's
not
not.
always the case.
Do you know what? There are many Ontarians who have had the displeasure of being involved in a car accident. They think, you know what, I pay my premiums for the last 20 years. I'm a good driver. I haven't had any demerit points. I'm in an unfortunate situation and I get into an accident. And now all of a sudden my insurance company's not there for me, or now all of a sudden I'm not only am I injured and is my ego bruised, or I'm sore and I'm out the inconvenience of having to get a rental car, but now I'm fighting my insurance company for what I paid for.
And your rating has been
And I'm thinking,
reduced.
I'm just translating this into one of these scenarios here where how readily available is that insurance company going to be to come out and pay the claim?
Yeah, it's like a different levels of money pit. So at least when you interview your own inspector and hire your own inspector, and if you don't do a good job of that, at least there's some accountability there. Yeah. But then this next step of again, not to overuse the term naivety, but it's really relevant right now in this conversation. And so you've gone with this guaranteed thing, and you still end up with some level of money pit, and it's just there's a square peg in a round hole there somewhere.
Yeah.
You know.
So
Go
ahead.
Go you first.
Bottom
this is an exciting
line
topic.
then, you're presented with this guaranteed home inspection as a home buyer, and caution is obviously one word, but what would your advice be? Still get your own home inspection?
The only way I would ever instruct a family member, friend, associate, anybody to accept a seller's inspection, a guaranteed seller's inspection, is if they interviewed the inspector and were able to examine the report before agreeing to accept it and waive their condition, because some of these reports are very rudimentary and confusing and convoluted, and again, not based in a thorough process, and that is a huge problem. It's going to suck money out of your wallet afterward.
Good
So
advice.
we've got to go to a break, but I think you just gave us a natural segue. When we come back, we're going to talk with Andy about how is it that you should interview the home inspector, and what is it that you should expect from the report or to be contained within the report.
Good.
Oh, and is the report, and by the way, how quickly should that report be generated and produced? You know what I mean? Lots of
Exactly.
questions we got to ask. So don't touch that dial, as they say. When we come back from the breaks, Andy's going to take us through what you as a buyer can expect during a home inspection. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we've got our guest, Andy Christie from Safe Homes Canada. Andy, take us through. What should a buyer expect from their home inspector? How do you interview the home inspector? What about a seller's inspection? Is that a good idea before you list your house?
It's basically the same interview no matter what side of the ball you're on. So whether you're selling a house and getting a pre-inspection done, which we've already talked a bit about whether that's really valid or not, or if you're buying and you want to interview an inspector. Very simple questions. A, winter, what do you do? How do you inspect the shingles? The only answer is, I'm getting a ladder out, and even if I have to get someone to hold it, I'm going up to at least to the edge of the roof. We go all the way around, but at least a couple of sides of the house. Look at the shingles. You can see flashing shingles, everything. So how do you do the roof? How do you do the attic? A lot of the houses that get sold in Ontario are older homes where you need to know what's under the insulation. The only answer for relating to how people inspect the attic is I go all the way through the attic with my knee pads and my mask, and I dig test holes to make sure you don't have asbestos, back guano, etc.
Yeah.
Nasty things, safety things insurance companies.
If you're not getting dirty, you haven't done your job.
It's a dirty job. And you got to have the gear, you got to have the dust mask, you got to have the knee pads, you got to have that stuff, and you've got to do a thorough job. Another question, how long is the inspection going to take? So after 25 years, 2.5 hours is my standard minimum for a newer, smaller home. You need 2.5 hours. Obviously more time if you're communicating a lot with a client.
Now, if I'm asking around as a buyer, who am I talking to? Who am I asking for referrals on inspectors? You want someone who's
how
had
do
a
I
home
know who's
inspector
good?
before? Am I
If you
asking a realtor?
If you trust your realtor,
What do you
some
think?
people don't like the realtor, but I mean, I like my realtor. zzz,
Yeah.
you know. And if you trust your realtor, of course their opinion's going to be valid. And but I would still just go back to the same questions. You don't really, honestly, you don't need to get a referral from anybody if you know the questions to ask.
There is a risk, I must say. Oftentimes the realtor wants that inspection to pass, regardless of which side
There
they're
are some
representing.
rubber stamp people in
Yeah.
our industry.
I don't want
thinking.
that. If
Yeah,
there's an issue,
yeah.
I want it revealed, because it's going to come up at some point anyways.
I
Okay.
told you about this when I did my very first home, and at the risk of repeating ourselves from last season, but I think it's a relevant comment. It was with the very first home I ever bought, and I said to my realtor, the only stipulation that I have is, because I don't know the first thing about it, I want to be there for the inspection. I don't want to nag the inspector, but I want to be there for it. I want to experience it. This is exciting for me. It's my very first home that I'm buying.
Education.
yeah.
You're seeing every piece of the house with the inspector.
I showed
it's
up.
amazing.
I showed up at the exact time that was scheduled, and you know what I heard from the inspector? I had a cancellation earlier. I managed to get here I'm already done. Here's your report. Just write me a check.
No. You want to, at the very least, if that happens, you want to say,
Unacceptable.
no, you're going to walk me through and show me what you
Every
saw
single
during,
piece. Every
during
piece.
that.
Back to the interview questions. How about this one? So when I was reading the report last week from this very brief seller's inspection, again, it was a confusing report. I picked through it, and it said a representative number of windows were inspected. So
What does that mean?
I'm
Yeah,
in
what does
shock.
that mean?
So all you should ever do, in my opinion, is check every single window.
If
Check
the first three
seal,
were good?
check it mechanically. Every single window in the whole building, because a lot
Yeah.
of homes have various ages of windows. You've got some from the 80s over here, some from the 2000s over there, some non-thermals in the basement, whatever. You've got to check every single one. Same with electrical. You have to check every
Each
piece.
one has its
this
own
thing of representative
issues.
data, checking it, no, that doesn't work at all, because that misses money coming out of your wallet to deal with the
That's
windows
just
that didn't get checked.
cutting
right?
corners. That's
It
all
kind
that
of
is.
sounds to
yeah.
me like you're buying that extended warranty on the used car that you picked up, and it's got a thousand things that it covers. But if you actually inspect what it covers,
Yeah.
it actually doesn't cover any of the expensive
Yeah.
things that you're going to likely be faced with.
Unfortunately, the seller's inspections, in my opinion, are just extremely protective of the underwriter, extremely protective of the inspector who didn't go on the roof. No, we don't go on the roof in winter. Well, I'm going to call someone else. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right?
Speaking of winter, it's cold out. HVAC systems are quite
Yeah,
expensive
good
to
question.
repair, and there's a million and one things that can go wrong with them. Tell us a little bit about
How do you test the
your-
AC when it's minus 25?
You don't. Once you get under once you get under 12 degrees Celsius, 11 degrees Celsius, something like that, AC, the physics don't work in air conditioners, right?
So should be calling you back in spring or
Well,
calling
it's
the
kind of a
service
funny, that's
technician?
one of those things in realty, in agreements for purchase and sale, as you know, where it's really difficult, if not impossible, to protect yourself fully relating to an AC unit where you're doing your deal in the middle of winter and you move in May or June, or you just go to start it up in May or June and it doesn't work.
I think there is, though, Andy, there is a legal, or Mike, a legal stipulation that you can't put in there. For example, if you're buying a house with a swimming pool and you're buying
Survives closing?
Yeah.
it, yeah, survives closing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So you can put in
If you remember to do it, you've got a
rider
realtor
or-
doing his job, representing you as the buyer, put that clause in there.
Yeah.
That survives the closing, because most of it says sell, survive, and not merge on closing.
Okay,
for a
so
lot of
again,
those things.
it's an education piece for our viewer. If you're buying a house that has air conditioning in the winter, if you're buying a house that has a furnace in
pool.
the middle of August,
Yeah,
or if
talk
you've got a
about
swimming
everything.
pool.
Talk about everything.
And there is no
Yeah.
dumb question, I guess, really, what it
No,
comes down to.
no, and that's the beauty of the education process when you're not rushing your inspection on site and you're taking your time to field every concern and question.
Yeah.
Now I'm still going to control the process on some level, one piece at a time, starting with foundations, control the process, but politely answer all questions and take the time to
What are the big
to
ticket?
address
There's-
concerns.
Yeah.
So you've got the report in your hand, and it's a comprehensive report. Now, how do I read that thing and decide what's cosmetic and what should I really be focusing on? What are the elements that are going to make me not want to buy the house versus what are the elements that are going to make me realize, okay, I now am prepared with what I'm facing and I can use this as a guiding document going forward?
Great question. So everybody has their own opinion on what's important to them, you know, and the inspector's job, let's keep it simple and go back to the fundamentals of it. What's the job? Assess every single piece, assess every single dollar that has to be spent at every part of the home, and convey that clearly to the client. Then the realtor and the client can figure out what's important to them, what the true money pieces are. But again, if you go back to pre-inspections, I think maybe some of the sort of the devil in the details part of it gets missed. Big things get missed too, but you have to consider everything. And when you get a document in front of you, it's got to have every single deficiency. That's why you have to execute at least a 2.5-hour job. Otherwise, you're missing things. Check every window, check every electrical piece, go all the way through the attic. When you do all of that, whether it's a pre-inspection for a seller or a buyer, then the realtor and the client can have an informed conversation about how they're going to, how they're going to deal with it.
Yeah. So this is a good, actually, a really good piece of information. And just before we go to the break, I would say then this is a document that you take back and you sit with your realtor, and you also sit with your licensed mortgage professional, and you're going to see, wait a second, I've been pre-qualified, or I've been qualified to spend X amount of dollars on a house and get a mortgage for this much money. Now I need to decide the items that are contained within the document, do they fit within my budget?
Do I have enough money?
Do I have enough money, or am I in trouble?
Money I may have to spend the first 6 months or in the next 2 years.
We've got to go to break, so when we come back, let's pick that up and talk about what comes next. We'll be right back on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Andy, great segment, great content. We've talked about sort of what comes back in the report. Now, the recommendation obviously is take a pause, sit back, review the report, decide if this is the home that you want to buy, if the items that are contained within the report, if there's anything that is going to take you outside your budget. Worst thing that you can do is find yourself in a home that you can't afford to be in, right?
Yeah.
But really, when you've looked at the report, you get to decide, Mike, are these things that I can live with?
Yes.
Are these
and
things
that
I can
answer will
pick
be
away
different
at
for
over the
different
next year?
people.
Exactly.
For sure. And you just made me think of something, and that is, I think in our industry, one of the sort of deficiencies of inspection sometimes is that an inspector thinks their job is to tell you, you have brick on your building. It's like a list. No. They need to be completely connected, inspectors do, to the resolving problems. Understanding what the most inexpensive solution is at every piece of the house. Yeah. That's part of the job. So it's okay and appropriate for a realtor or a client to say, what's the solution to this? Now, at some point, if it's some confusing electrical thing, you need an electrician, or but I'm not turning to a guy who owns a backhoe and asking him and consulting with someone who owns a backhoe about whether or not you need to dig around the foundation walls, right? So let's qualify all that first. Part of the job is presenting what the exact solutions are.
Yeah, safety issues first and foremost.
And at that point, again, it's up to the realtor and the client to look at and it's a question period kind of thing with the inspector, but don't miss anything, don't ignore anything, because it all adds up.
Mike, I think you touched on it at the break, and that really is simple. If you're buying a brand new car, you expect it to be in showroom factory condition. If you're buying a resale car, don't point out the minor ding and dent.
And even on the new home as well, there can be issues. They may not be surface issues, but there could be structural issues, and I would not forego a home inspection just because it's a brand new home.
That would be insane, because every single Tarion inspection, literally, almost every single one of them, we find extensive deficiencies.
Yes.
And 90-something% of buyers of new homes in Ontario, the deficiencies survive the end of the warranty period.
So here's an interesting part about buying a brand new home as well. Oftentimes the builder is using subtrades. And so in any one development, you may have 50 or 100 different companies who are doing the brick. You may have 20 different companies who are doing the drywall. It's who's available, who can get it up. It's a volume build. And there's almost an expectation that says, just go ahead, leave it there. We'll deal with that at the 1-year inspection or at the 90-day inspection, and Tarion will pick that up and take care of it. How often do you see that as a reality?
Tarion doesn't pick anything up and take care of it, because they're only there to respond to inquiries and reports submitted by buyers, and your average buyer doesn't know where to find the deficiencies. So it goes back to, you want to be a smart, self-serving, prudent buyer, call a qualified inspector for a Tarion inspection. It's really important, really important.
Minor anecdote, I actually got caught in this scenario. We actually bought a subdivision built home, a volume build home, and I had a very convincing after sales
Representative.
from the home builder walk through, and they said, hey, you know what, yeah, that's
You're
true.
a rock star.
That little item is there, that pop is there, that tile is there. You know what, do you mind if we just deal with that all at the 1 year and just let all these things, just keep a list of these things and we'll deal with them at the 1 year. Unfortunately for us, being naive and getting snowed, what we found out is the fact that because we didn't file the first two
30-day
reports,
report.
the 30-day report, the 90-day report.
PDI, 30-day.
When it came to the 1 year, Terrion said, you didn't file your 30-day, we're not going to cover you for your 1 year.
New or resale, there's always going to be things to address.
That's
sure.
that's like a bait and switch game by
It's
the
exactly what happened.
Yeah,
So we
doesn't
ended up
sound
paying
good.
for it. It wasn't life changing, but it was rather frustrating. Your trust.
I'm sorry
is-
to hear that. I can't say it strongly enough. For anybody who's bought a new home, it is brilliant to get a full inspection done.
Oh, yeah.
Quite often the insulation will be R50 at the access point, and then when I tiptoe through the attic and take the tape measure and put it down in other parts of the attic, guess what? Quite often it's not enough. And it's not about it being intentional on anybody's behalf. It's just the way it happened, and you got to check. You can't assume anything is going to be.
Buyer beware.
Yeah,
Check it out.
you can't
thoroughly.
assume it's going to be done right.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up, though. The point of the story really was there's this new phenomenon that's out there now that's going to start trending that we're going to see more and more of. And I don't know if our broadcast to our
I don't know that we
viewership's
will.
going to be enough, right? We don't know
Yeah,
what's going to
I don't
happen,
know.
but
Yeah.
it is a concern, and the concern is the new idea is sellers can get a guaranteed seller's home inspection.
yeah.
And so now we're at the point of the transaction. You've got a willing buyer and a willing seller, and the seller puts on the table as a perk, I've got a guaranteed home inspection. What should happen at that point? What do you suggest?
If I'm the buyer,
If I'm the buyer,
I will not be accepting it. If they want to give it to me, that's fine, but I'm still going to be inspecting the house myself, or if anybody that I know is buying that building.
there's no
I'm
let's
gonna
say
minute
time
buy.
is of
you
the
need to
essence
do
and
your
you've
own.
run out of your financing period. You've got to waive. You've got 3 days to waive, or there's pressure from somebody else to buy, and you're feeling the pressure. What do you do?
I'm not doing it. But I mean, I know a lot of people feel pressured, and I'm just not doing it. I'm not buying a building, and I would recommend that nobody buys a building without having their own unbiased.
Don't buy under
Well,
pressure.
if it's going to be biased, I want it biased on my part when I'm buying. I don't want it biased on the seller's part.
If you're
And
under pressure, step back.
you got to, exactly, great advice. And you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to ask the right questions. If you absolutely want to consider a seller's report, I would want to see the report beforehand and keep my options open. I would want to interview whoever inspected that home. First question, how long were you there? Second question, did you go all the way through the attic? Just go through all those things we talked about. Did you check every window? Did you check every circuit? You know, this is not a partial inspection world. You do a partial inspection, that means you're probably going to leak money out of your wallet later for reasons you don't know about right now. So,
All great advice, Andy. And
sir.
Yeah, so it is great advice. Thank you very much. How do people get a hold of you, Andy? We're going to have your information on the screen. What's the seasonal shifts going to be like as well for you right now?
what do you mean, Arif?
Middle of winter. Are you taking longer to get inspections done? What can people expect if they're calling you? How fast can you turn them around?
It's sort of, there's a flow to it, like any business, there's a flow to it. You just try to fit people in, and it's usually possible to do that. If people call within, a few days before their inspection is best, and you can fit things in. I mean, winter's a little slower.
before it's due,
Then when the market gets busy, as you know, it gets crazy busy, and then we're always.
My
sort of-
advice to buyers is that's your first 2 phone calls. You're going to be calling your mortgage broker. You're going to be calling your home inspector.
Excellent.
Same day, if
Excellent.
not the next day.
Thank
after
you.
you've-
Yeah.
Thank
Is
you
there,
very
is there
much.
anything that we should have asked you that we haven't asked you?
Is the French toast ready yet?
Okay.
Steve, is it ready yet?
There's a buffet after the.
Well, listen, we
think
want to
we've
thank
covered
you
a
very
lot.
much for giving us your time, giving us your great and valuable insight. I mean, I think whether we're dealing with brand new first-time homeowners or people who are, basically the market shifting from a seller's market to a buyer's market or vice versa.
New or resale?
Newer resale. There are a lot of questions, and a lot of people might take for granted the value or the timing or the importance of fitting that home inspection into the mix, right? Especially in a market where people want to see closings or waive conditions in 48 hours or 5 days. Sometimes
Pressure.
that pressure really is something that, as you said, Mike, you should step away from.
Yeah.
You know, you can't.
Don't be doing it under duress.
Don't worry about the inspection. It's all been renovated.
Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly. The famous last words. It's all been renovated.
That's
Mike,
the catch-22 if there ever was
we are
one.
out of time. I want to
We
say
are.
thank you very much. But to our
Thank you, Andy.
audience, you can catch us on social media. You can look up Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. You can Google Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and you'll catch our podcast in our archive.
Facebook page, Twitter page, we're out there.
Somewhere on the bottom of the screen here is going to be our email
All the
address
info
and our
will be there.
website. But Andy, thanks very much as always. I want to reach across and leave you hanging. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Andy.
We
Thanks,
look forward
guys.
to having you
Always
as our
good
guest again.
information.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we'll
Thank
see you again next week on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif.
Take care.